Recorded Books and One-Click Digital present The Hunted, a Ralph Compton novel by Matthew P. Mayo, narrated by Pete Bradbury. Keep your enemies close. Charlie turned to see Raleigh a dozen feet from him, a wide smile on his face, the revolver's hard black snout once more aimed right at his own big chest. "Not a prayer, big boy. Besides, where are you going to go?" Raleigh smiled that split-lip grin, his swollen eyes creased into yellow-black slits. "We got us Injun killers behind, in front, to the left and right. You'd be dooming the poor, pitiful town of Gamble with all that gold hid away and ready for the plucking." Charlie's eyes narrowed. "Besides, strength in numbers." Raleigh leaned forward as if he were sharing a secret, though he was still a good 10 feet from the big man. Everyone in the camp had hushed and seemed to lean in, too. "You need us more than we need you, Big Charlie, if that's what you're calling yourself now." With the suddenness of a gunshot, Charlie realized that Raleigh knew something about him, something he'd worked long and hard to keep quiet, keep hidden. He thought back to that bar in Moncton. Had to be he heard it there, maybe from that big-mouthed Dutchie. Charlie ground his teeth together so tight he thought for sure they might powder, but he didn't care. All he wanted to do was snap that whelp's head off. "I should have finished you last night when I had the chance." Chapter 1. "That's what you got for me? That?" The dealer nodded toward the cards laid before him. His words came out too loud, and as if he'd been waiting long minutes to say them. The thin man with oiled mustaches, black visor, and arm garters shook his head and winked at the gawkers gathered about his table. Across from him his customer sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. He was a mammoth man with a broad back turned to the rest of the room. The dealer and the others clustered by the table flicked eyes at each other, then settled back on him. The player's rough-spun coat, the dark color of axle grease, strained across the shoulders as he brought a hand up to scratch the stubble on his face. "I'm out," he said quietly, nodding toward the table. "You about were, anyway." The dealer shifted his cigarillo to the other side of his slit mouth and winked at the watchers. Their soft laughs chafed Charlie, but he'd earned them. Coming in here half-lit and feeling as if he knew more about playing blackjack and bucking the tiger than any man alive. Heck, 3 hours and he'd spent more time running from it than wrangling the tiger. And what did he have to show for it? A whole lot of empty in his pockets. He had his emergency $5 piece in his vest, and that, plus his mule Mabel May and his meager kit, was about all he had in the world now. 3 hours earlier he'd been halfway to owning a sizable chunk of land in a pretty mountain valley. Now he'd set himself back by 2 years. That was how long it had taken him to earn that $2,000. Those 2 years had all but killed him, he'd worked so hard. And now he was 2 years older, and as his father used to say of his family's lot in life, he was poorer than an outhouse rat. "Hey, how about letting someone else take up space in that chair?" The dealer squinted one eye against the slow curl of silver smoke rising up the side of his face from the cat-turd cigarillo. Charlie wanted to smear the smugness off his face, but he'd avoided jail for too long now to cozy up to the idea of being near broke and tossed in the calaboose in Moncton, Idaho territory. He pushed away from the table, the chair squawking back on the boot-worn boards. He kept his eyes on the dealers the entire time he stood, taking longer than he needed to. It wasn't much, but showing off his height was about all he had. It worked. The dealer's grin sagged at the corners, and his cigarillo drooped as his eyes followed the big man's progress upward. He'd not been there when Charlie sat down at the table, so he didn't know how big the fellow he'd been mocking was. And what he saw was a giant of a man, closer to 7 feet.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?